Now this particular Mazda 3 may not look that special to you, but it's very special to me for two reasons. Firstly, I've always had a soft spot for the Mazda 3 Liftback with the 2-litre in the highest spec. But up until last week, Burma's didn't have one on test. So I've been waiting patiently for years to drive a Mazda 3 2-litre Liftback High Plus. The second reason is that this particular Mazda 3 Liftback High Plus is the only one of its kind in the country, because you can't buy this color. So this is our full review of the Mazda 3 Liftback High Plus in ceramic white, which you can't buy. My name is AIMAN ABDULLAH. This is Malaysian Motoring. Before we get into the video, be sure to hit subscribe and hit the bell to be notified every time we make a new upload, and all the links to our socials are in the description. But ladies and gentlemen, a review that may not be of any use to you at all. Now, actually, I was kind of kidding, because you will be interested in this review if you're looking at the Mazda 3 Liftback, just not in this color, unless you ask them really nicely and pay a premium. Now, there are a few changes with the 2024 model year update, but what hasn't changed is the powertrain. So under this bonnet, you will find a 2-litre 4-cylinder Skyactiv G petrol engine with power going to the front wheels via a Skyactiv 6-speed automatic gearbox. Now, like I said, that hasn't changed. The front end hasn't really changed much either, because as you can see, the aesthetics remain very similar to before. So you still have full LED headlights, which on this High Plus model gets the signature LED illumination, replete with the Mazda heartbeat indicator function, which I can trigger from the key, which just does that to make it look a little bit more special. Now, if you're looking at the differences between the Liftback and the Saloon, one of the easiest ways to tell from the front is actually this garnish here. Because on the Liftback it is done in black, on the Saloon it is done in chrome, because the Saloon appeals to slightly more mature buyers, whereas this is for immature hooligans like me. Now, the update with these headlights is that it now comes with adaptive front lighting system, also known as matrix LED headlights. Now, they aren't as nifty or as smart as what you get in some premium brands, but they do a pretty good job, and they are quite eager in terms of their usability. They don't wait for the road to be completely dark before they switch on. They actually work on like semi-lit roads and stuff like that, which I certainly appreciate. Now, this obviously is the Mazda corporate face, which is part of their Kodo design language, which means the furthest edge on this vehicle is actually the bonnet, under which you will find the 2D Mazda logo, because behind that sits a radar. Now, down the side, you will find 18-inch alloy wheels on this particular model, done up in a nice sort of stealth grey color, wrapped in Bridgestone Turanza T005A tires. Now, 18-inch doesn't really seem like it's very large, but the mating of these wheels and these tires is perfect for our market, because, let's be honest, our surfaces are not that great, and these tires do provide pretty good performance in both wet and dry conditions, and they are not that noisy. But this is, I think, where the Mazda 3 Liftback looks its best, because as part of Mazda's latest design language, they've reduced the number of sort of hard creases down the side of the car, limited to just that one little belt line down below. And as a result, with complex colors like this, or the Soul Red Crystal, or whatever the hell it is they're calling these days, the back end of this car and the side profile just look absolutely stunning. Now, a couple of things though. Firstly, because of this design, this pillar is absolutely enormous, and this becomes an issue when you're trying to look over your shoulder for visibility. The other issue that I have with this side profile is this little detail here, because the chrome strip for the rear door has a seam about here, which doesn't line up very well, and to me, I'm just wondering why this couldn't be one piece. I know that BMW makes a lot of noise about their one-piece aluminium trims, but this is significantly smaller than what you get on a 7 Series, and surely you can't be saving that much money by putting that seam here. And of course, this is the view that most people will see most of the time, because people who drive Mazda 3 Liftbacks tend to be angry, aggressive little buggers. like me. Now, because it's the High Plus, you get the signature LED taillights, which means you get a couple of rings on this side, replete again with that heartbeat indicator that I mentioned earlier. The bottom half of the vehicle does look very neat and very minimalist. You only get a little bit of this black plastic cladding, which I assure you is black. This car is just a little bit dirty despite being ceramic coated because I was a bit too lazy to rinse the car. Now, the downside to having the liftback may, to some people, come in terms of storage space because naturally this is not as deep as what you'd get from the Mazda 3 saloon. However, this is actually plenty big enough for 5 people's worth of luggage if need be, because this boot is quite deep. There is a bit of a lip, but it goes in far enough, and the rear seats do fold 60-40 if you need a little bit more space. And of course, underneath the boot floor, you will find a space saver spare wheel and a jack and all of the necessary items, but clearly not enough room for the emergency first aid kit or the tire repair kit that comes as standard with this car, because on all Mazdas it sits in the boot. However, there is no coil mat back here, which is interesting. The coil mats, however, have made a full return inside, and so have a lot of other things in this car. So for example, we still have the same Mazda MZD Connect system on a wider screen, which I'm pretty sure has been slightly upgraded because it looks like the graphics are a little bit crisper than before. It's still not a touchscreen, which I don't mind because the controller system here is perfectly good enough to control most things. And if you run your Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, which unfortunately is wired, if you press the music or nav button, it goes straight into your phone mirroring system rather than using any of the onboard systems, which I think is quite a smart little piece of trickery. The other thing that has also remained in this interior are physical controls for the HVAC system, which are pleasant to use, they are easy to use, you remember where all the buttons are, it's great! Let's stick with this, shall we? There are also physical buttons for the ADAS system, all available here on the steering wheel, which again look great, they are nice and clicky. However, if I wanted to nitpick, I am slightly disappointed by the fact that the center buttons on the spokes for the source, mute on the left side and cancel and resume for the adaptive cruise control on the right side are now done in black, because in the MX-30 they are done in silver and it just looks a little bit nicer. Now, what is nice in this car, however, are the displays themselves. So I mentioned the MZD Connect screen over there, but we also have a semi-digital instrument cluster up ahead. So I have actual analog dials left and right, left for the tachometer, right for my engine temperature and fuel gauge, and in the middle there is a digital speedometer, as well as various other displays to tell you things like your ADAS system, your current fuel consumption, and your distance to empty. All of that are things that I appreciate enormously. Of course, this is not the most customizable system, but that is by design, because Mazda says you do not want to distract the driver with too many options. So apparently Mercedes-Benz drivers must be very distracted. Now, up ahead, however, you will find a heads-up display, which has also been updated for this car, and now is even better, crisper, it responds faster, and it also includes and integrates the navigational instructions from your Waze onto this display in front of you, which I like a lot. The other thing that I like a lot is the material quality in here, because obviously being a Mazda, it is slightly better than you'd expect, particularly for this price point. Everything you touch is nice and soft touch. You have this faux leather up front with contrast stitching. You have more faux leather here, more faux leather here with more contrast stitching, more faux leather, contrasting. It goes on and on. Even the tops of the dash, which you're never going to really touch that often, are still nice and soft, and everything in here is screwed together with a degree of quality and attention to detail that you just don't get from vehicles like Toyota and Honda. What you do get, however, from those cars are slightly more comprehensive air conditioning vents for the front that feed into the back, because in a Mazda you only get 2 vents for the front passenger and 2 vents for the driver here, which very kindly blow directly into my hands, which makes me very, very cold when I drive. But mercifully, I can put my hand and warm on the wireless charger over here, which is again part of that update. The other parts of the update include USB-C ports in here as well as in the back, for added practicality and a little bit more speed when charging, and that's about it. The driver's seat, however, is electrically adjustable, replete with memory functionality, 2-stage of course, and it'll adjust the mirrors and so on, which I do appreciate, because vehicles like these can or often are shared between partners and so on, which means having that practicality is useful. And of course, the interior appointments are all very upmarket, far more upmarket than you expect for this price point. The only trouble is this doesn't come with a Bose audio system. For that, you'll have to buy the Ignite edition, which is about 20 grand more expensive. Now, the back end of this car is kind of where some people give it some grief, because naturally the saloon does seem a little bit more capacious, but actually, in terms of space, I'm pretty okay. I've got a good amount of headroom and a good amount of knee room. It's just a little bit dark because Mazdas are always tinted as standard, and the tinting on this car is particularly aggressive. Now, back here, however, the lack of more adequate front seat ventilation is fine because I do have a couple of crotch coolers down here, and they do blow quite well at that. In terms of seating position, I have decent under thigh support, and the floor actually goes up just a little bit where my feet rest, which means I can get into a very comfortable position indeed. I also have an armrest within which lives a couple of cup holders should I need it, although a center passenger here may not feel that comfortable because the center bit is raised and it's not that wide. You do get some nice bottle holders in the doors, and I am happy to report that quality back here is as good as the front, where everything here is soft touch all the way until this particular part right here where you do want slightly more harder wearing plastics, and so that is available here. The other thing that I appreciate is the fact that all 4 doors come with illuminated door sills that say Mazda 3. It's small and it doesn't really serve a practical purpose, but it does help to make this car feel a little bit more upmarket. That and the fact that these coil mats fit quite nicely. If you're trying to fit a child seat back here, you will note that the seat anchor points are removable, or the covers for them are removable, which means you will lose these almost immediately. And these rear doors do not open all that wide, which means if you're trying to fit a bulky rear-facing child seat, particularly if you have your seat set up the way I have, there may be a bit of a space limitation here as well as a space limitation here. But then again, if you were looking for a practical family car, chances are you'd be looking at a CX-5, not a Mazda 3, which means all of this is mostly moot. In fact, I have a suspicion that the majority of you watching this video for this particular car are more interested in the way this car drives, and I'm happy to report that is a very positive experience indeed. Now, when I say that the driving experience of the Mazda 3 is very positive, well, I mean it just as that. Mazdas are generally very good cars to drive. There's a very good balance between ride and handling, and there's usually quite a lot of communication for the driver and so on. And with this updated Mazda 3, I'm happy to report that everything remains status quo. This car is very exciting to drive. It has something called G-vectoring control, or GVC, which essentially controls the car's body movements by braking individual brakes in order to ensure smoother progress. As a result, it means that when you're driving this car enthusiastically, it feels more stable and more planted on the road, giving buyers and drivers a little bit more sense of confidence out on the open road. On top of that, the Bridgestone Tarantas that I mentioned earlier, as I said, offer pretty good performance both in the wet and in the dry. And as a result, it means that, again, this car remains very stable and very planted no matter what. These are all things that I certainly appreciate hugely when I'm behind the wheel of any Mazda for that matter, but particularly this Mazda 3. Now, under the bonnet, as I mentioned earlier, is a 2-litre naturally aspirated 4-cylinder paired to a 6-speed automatic gearbox with power going only to the front wheels. This is a setup that we've seen before. However, for the new model year update, the Mazda 3 loses the option of a 1.5-litre, and it also loses the core specifications. Instead, we now get a rather simplified variant lineup, which is a bit more reflective of both the Mazda 3's position in the market as well as the aspirational nature of its owners. And as a result, I do feel that this is a slightly better setup for this vehicle. So this 2-litre is now standard across the range, the only difference being things like the wheels as well as the interior trims as well as the ADAS suite. So driving this High Plus, it means that this particular car is chock full of all the active safety systems that Mazda currently provides. As such, you have things like radar-guided cruise control with traffic jam assist, blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alert, you have parking sensors all the way around, you have lane centering and lane keep assist, ensuring that you do have full level 2 semi-autonomy at all times. Now, one of the things that I appreciate about the way Mazda does its safety systems is that for level 2 semi-autonomy, it uses radar instead of camera. The reason why this is important is because obviously a camera is more susceptible to weather changes. So for example, it's raining heavily. For example, the camera may not be able to work the way it's supposed to, whereas a radar system is not flummoxed by weather changes, firstly. Secondly, because it uses a radar, it means that the data that the car receives is a little bit more granular. And as a result, it means that the car doesn't freak out as much when there are immediate or sudden changes. Things like a car cutting into lane or a bike suddenly swerving past. The car doesn't freak out nearly as much as vehicles that use a camera-based system. These are all huge positives for the Mazda 3 because it means that when you're out on the motorway, be it stuck in a traffic jam or even out on the open road where there is no traffic so to speak of, progress is smooth and it's comfortable, which means no matter what, when you're in this, you do feel like you are enjoying a more elevated driving experience, something that feels a bit more premium, a little bit more plush, a little bit more polished. These are, again, all things I appreciate very much. The other thing that I'd like to touch on is NVH, because the Mazda 3 in this regard is sort of a mixed bag. In terms of wind noise, it is very, very well suppressed, even well north of the national speed limit, which I'm sure is down to fantastic aerodynamics. Road noise, on the other hand, is a bit neither here nor there, because it depends very, very heavily on the surface that you're on. Like, for example, I'm on Subang Airport Road now, and the road is not exactly the best surface in the world, and so you do get some noise intrusion even at about 80 kilometers an hour. But when you're driving on, say, the NKVE or the Elite Highway, where the surface is a little bit better, it does stay quite quiet well north, again, of the national speed limit, which is exactly what you'd expect from a car that's asking for about this much money. What I do appreciate in terms of noise intrusion is actually in terms of the engine, because this is a naturally aspirated engine from Mazda. They're very famous for. The Skyactiv G has won multiple awards and it continues to be a fantastic engine to use. But because it's naturally aspirated, in a world where vehicles like the Honda Civic, for example, now run a turbocharged engine, and more vehicles in the segment run turbocharged engines, it's nice to have this lovely, tractable, predictable, naturally aspirated mill up front, because it means that when you're driving enthusiastically, this engine is very predictable, and it also means that when you're just driving, you're potting about from point A to point B, the fuel consumption remains very predictable. The trouble with turbocharged engines is that if you drive them with any degree of enthusiasm, the fuel economy goes immediately out the window, whereas in an NA engine, it remains broadly the same. There are some variances, top and bottom, of course, but we're talking about smaller margins. And so that means that in a car like this, if at the moment, like the car is reporting, it's doing about 12.5 kilometers per litre, which is a pretty good figure if you ask me, even if I drive a little bit more enthusiastically, I should still be able to expect about 12 kilometers per litre. Whereas if I were to drive something like, say, the Volkswagen Jetta, which was incredibly efficient when that car was still on sale, if you drove sensibly, you'd be able to get about 6.5, even 6 litres per 100 kilometers, but drive any more intently and that would immediately shoot up to about 9, 10, even 11 litres per 100 kilometers. So again, this is a big win in terms of daily usability. So in terms of daily usability, would I recommend the Mazda 3 Liftback? Well, if you don't really need all the space that the boot provides in the Mazda 3 Saloon, then yes, this is an absolutely excellent vehicle within the segment. It feels plush and upmarket without really penalizing you in terms of price. Sure, this is not as affordable as what you might be able to get from Toyota or Honda, but from the moment you sit in it, you know exactly why you're paying that premium. On top of that, you have that incredibly reliable engine and you have Burma's after-sales, which is worth its weight in gold. And of course, this car comes with a 5-year unlimited mileage warranty, replete with a service package, which means that's 5 years of absolutely hassle-free ownership. To me, of the Mazda 3s available in the lineup, this is actually the one that I would pick because, as I've said before, I've always had a soft spot for the Mazda 3 Liftback, and in this, guys, it is spot on perfect. This is exactly what I want out of a car. It's fun to drive, it's good to look at, it feels plush inside, and it's got a pretty good sound system. And it has level 2 semi-autonomy, which is very, very important for me because I'm always caught in traffic jams. However, if you spend more time on the motorway and therefore would appreciate a little bit more torque or a little bit more immediacy in that torque, then you may be better served by something like the Honda Civic 1.5 Turbo, which coincidentally comes with a lot of the same level 2 semi-autonomy features, but just with a turbocharged engine and a boot. But this still remains the better car to drive. But there is a fly in the ointment here because Toyota has recently updated the Corolla Altis with a GR Sport model. And if the Vios GR Sport of the previous generation was any indicator, that should be a pretty good car to drive. Excellent, in fact, despite the relative performance deficit. So I certainly look forward to having that on test. But if you're looking for a svelte, sexy C-segment hatchback, then the Mazda 3 Liftback is most certainly it. And that has been our review of the 2024 Mazda 3 Liftback Hybrid Plus. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell icon so you're notified every time we make a new upload. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. All the links are in the description below. And if you'd like to follow our WhatsApp channel, that link is down there too. We hope to see you there. and we thank you very much for your support. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Take care, stay safe, and jangan bodoh.